This is Red Dog Terrain. Welcome back to the shed. Today we're building a tower in a lake. While continuing to practice and build with resin, I was inspired by Reschensee. This is a lake with a 14th century steeple sticking out of it. In 1950, a power company wanted to build a dam to create an artificial lake to connect two other lakes. Unfortunately, the town of Curon was in the middle, but they did it anyways. The town was demolished, and what wasn't demolished was flooded. Now, all that remains is the steeple of the church. I started by cutting a piece of cardstock, 8.5 inches by 6 inches. I bent it into 2-inch segments with a little 1/2-inch overhang to make more surface area to glue to. Then I added foam inside to give it support and rigidity. Also, I cut the bottom so that it leans a little. Alright, let's do some brickwork. The steeple in Italy is well constructed and has been stable for like 600 years, and 70 of those were partially submerged. I didn't want my tower to look as well made, and definitely not as uniform. I wanted some random brick sizes, something that looked more fantasy and not real pretty. I really enjoy doing foam brickwork, one little brick at a time, slowly building, cutting bricks to fit, and layering them in. I usually have a podcast or a video playing, and it's a relaxing way to spend my evening in the shed. After all the bricks were in place and drying, I moved on to the roof. Going back to the cardstock, I cut 4 triangles and a few strips that I would use to join them. I really tried to make my cuts as accurate as possible and took my time lining them up. Since putting out these videos and allowing others to view and rewind my imperfections, I find myself trying to be more precise. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I did add a little bit of baking soda to fill in a few thin gaps. Also, it strengthens the glue. Using my Proxon, I cut a steep pyramid. This little piece added a lot of strength to the roof. It made me feel more comfortable knowing the roof had support. Speaking of support, let me tell you about this week's sponsor, BetterHelp. BetterHelp is a mental health platform that provides online mental health services. I'm kidding, I don't have a sponsor. Reschensee has 3 windows on the north and south side and 2 on the east and west. I didn't have that many windows. I had 3 3D printed windows. I got them done at my local library. I traced them onto the bricks and then cut them out. I Mod Podged and black painted the inside of the windows before I glued them in, because I knew it would be impossible to try and paint around the windows. I didn't film it, but at some point I painted the windows to match the roof, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. There's this little store downtown that resells art supplies and beads and all manners of bits and pieces. I love that little store. Anyway, I found this bracelet there. The links make great decorations on my tower. Back to the roof. With it securely glued in place, I wanted to add some detail and cover up some of the gaps. I cut strips of cardstock about half an inch wide and folded them. Then I used the roof as a guide to figure out where to cut and how long. To finish it off, I cut a paper template of 4 triangles. Then I use that as a guide to cut the cardstock. A few folds later, and we have a cap. It's not a perfect fit, but it works well enough. I saw this in another video, but I truly can't remember where. If you know, please leave a comment. These tiny clothespins are great for making the ends of beams. That little bit of detail would be impossible to recreate with a foam. A few snips and some super glue, and the roof is done. And with that, the tower is built. Next comes a coat of secret sauce, and then a layer of gray. The roof gets painted in copper. After that, I picked out a few bricks to paint in reds and browns and orange, and even a green. Then an overbrush of gray, and a dry brush of light buttermilk. Sitting on the banks of what would soon become the new lake, the townsfolk watched as the water rushed in. Children cried as the streets they played in flooded. Mothers wept as their homes filled with water. Fathers fumed as the fields they tended were submerged. Generations were washed away. The water slowly rose, drowning family history and memories, never to be witnessed again. The land baron, standing on the opposite bank, counted his coin. Here's something totally new to me. I tried to make a patina on a copper roof. I started by mixing in some medium with light turquoise and aqua. At first I painted it on, but quickly realized that it didn't look natural, so I began to dab the paint on. I put the lighter color on first, and then layered on the darker one. It seemed way too bright at first, but I pushed forward. When it was dry, I squirted on an oil wash, and this toned it down significantly. I would later use a regular wash to get into the crevices and darken it a little bit more. I'm quite satisfied with how this turned out, especially for my first try. Before putting the tower in resin, I glued in the beads, painted the windows, and gave the whole thing a wash. Having learned a lot from my mast build, I started with the resin. This is the top of a small mixing bucket, a little too small. I really wish I'd used a larger one, but lessons learned. I hot glued it down to a piece of dollar store foam board. I mixed up a batch of sculpt mold and filled in the bottom. I made sure to leave enough space in the middle for the tower. I put the tower in and let them dry. Later, when I would take off the plastic barrier, I realized the sides of the sculpt mold weren't dry. I was really worried it would fall apart in the middle of the night, but eventually it dried firm, no issues. Another thing I did off camera, boy I have to stop doing that, was give the bottom of the tower a wash of green. Also, there's a few sticks and pebbles to serve as stones and logs. I mixed up some resin, added a bit of ink, and poured it in. I cut away the plastic, and I was so happy. I love how it turned out. Sure, it could have been a deeper pour, sure it could have been bigger, but I really, really like it. I wasn't sure what to do with the outside edge of the ground part. Paint it, gloss it, sand it. In the end, my partner suggested leaving it raw, and that's what I did. I quickly trimmed the edge of the white foam and would later paint it black. While I cleaned up the edges with a sharp knife and my dribble, I want to thank those who have been huge supporters of me and my channel. Thanks for visiting me at cons and asking for stickers. Thanks for ordering shirts. Your enthusiastic support keeps this channel going. I don't want to say any names because I don't want to leave anyone out, but you know who you are. Thank you. I dabbed on gloss Mod Podge, which makes great ripples and a nice water effect. Then I used some silicone I had to make waves. This works well for small waves, but if they were any bigger, I would need to find something that dries clear. Pushing an old brush into the silicone and lifting it makes peaks and curls that mostly look like waves. Then, like Pacey Witter in Season 2 of Dawson's Creek, I frosted the tips. I used high gloss clear nail polish to bring back the shine of the water and waves. And the last thing I did was add a bit of resin to the windows to look like glass. My Reschensee inspired tower and lake is done. Thanks for watching. Please tell a friend, like, comment, share,